Ladies and gentlemen, on this, the 19th commemoration of the September 11th attacks, we come together to lift our hearts, to honor all the people we've lost, and reflect on the wisdom we've gained. We also come together to reconsider the meaning of the events of today. We're 1 year shy of the second decade of the post-9/11 world. Let's consider what we've learned 19 years on. For many of us, those old enough to have witnessed and understood the events of that day, 9/11 is a moment by which we've come to measure cataclysmic events. I was in Hohenfels, Germany, at the Joint Multinational Readiness Center. Our training center froze in time. A group of soldiers watched helplessly from afar at the cascade of panic and dread. A sense of surreal awareness blanketing all of us. All of our lives, we knew, were about to change. For the most part, we can all call to mind where we were and what we were doing. I say for the most part, because there are many observing this ceremony who cannot recall that day. Today, over 35% of the American population was under the age of 5 on that fateful day. They are too young to have formed a memory of the planes, the buildings, the screams, the smoke, and the confusion. A generation of Americans now stand between that awful moment and this ceremony. A generation of Americans who don't know of a world before 9/11. Americans too young to understand what the world was like before the plane hit that first tower. But we can enlighten. More importantly, we can try to explain what it means, and perhaps we must. For my part, I can tell those who are too young to understand that nothing can prepare you to see, in real time, in real life, a plane intentionally collide with a building full of thousands of people. If you witnessed the second plane before your eyes on live television, you have never been the same. Of hearing that the third plane struck the symbol of American military might, the Pentagon, and that we had hundreds of casualties. Of hearing of the fourth plane that somehow went down in a remote field in Pennsylvania, it would be weeks before we understood the valor and courage of a few whose rallying cry was, "Let's roll." We've all seen the footage many, many times. I imagine that those too young to know the visceral fear and outright rage of that day, of trying to make sense of the original crash, of the terrible certainty that the United States is under attack after the second crash, has simply become too numb to the whole thing. Fort Bragg, however, remembers. This is the place from which our nation launched its response. From here, we struck with a fist of fury at our enemies. Fort Bragg served as a launch pad for vengeance. Before that day of days, Army units didn't deploy, redeploy, and deploy again to fight. It was a different Army for a different kind of threat. A rotation to a training center was generally the most stressful event in the span of a military career. But here, on Fort Bragg, we responded. Furiously, repeatedly, and without hesitation. It was here that we reaffirmed our role as the warrior class in our social structure, the sheepdog keeping the wolf at bay. While there has been important and much deserved criticism about grand strategy in the process of that response, those who answered the call fulfilled their responsibility within that society. They did so honorably, selflessly, and at great personal cost. That unwavering commitment is what this eternal flame before us represents. Its cauldron, forged of steel salvaged from the same World Trade Center, that World Trade Center, a living marvel of human accomplishment, suddenly rendered dead, twisted steel. It's tragically appropriate that we commemorate 9/11 amidst another period of shared adversity. You see, today's pandemic has reinforced a faded concept from the early days of the Republic that rushed to the forefront of national consciousness 19 years ago. That idea is the social value we offer to one another. Toward that end, top of mind was love and sacrifices given society by nation's police, firefighters, rescue teams, dispatch units, and medical workers. We are so blessed to have the first responders from Fayetteville, Fort Bragg, and Spring Lake here. Their presence today serves as a reminder of all they do to keep society functioning in the face of a globe-shaking catastrophe. We are reminded that if not for America's doctors, nurses, ER technicians, and physicians' assistants, the phrase "going above and beyond" just doesn't quite describe it. While it is fitting, it is also odd to commemorate 9/11 and our collective union during the ongoing COVID crisis. It certainly allows us to reflect on the lessons from 9/11 that we've applied to the world since. I hope it also forces us to reflect on a difficult but necessary question. The real question is, after 19 years, are we united in our support for our fellow citizenry? We can only hope we've made progress. We certainly hope we are not more divided now than we were prior to 8:46 a.m. on that warm Tuesday. After 19 years, are we more appreciative of one another's contribution to the American mosaic? Or have division and hate darkened the promise of the national unity that arose from the smashed fragments of the World Trade Center? No matter what, we vowed to never forget. By that we meant we would leave behind our old, useless animus. We would pick up a lightness that would carry us toward one another. And we would also do so forever. Never forget. The never part meant there was no going back. Never forget was our rallying cry. In the days that followed, you heard it everywhere. All throughout the country, on military bases, newspaper headlines, national news, in the grocery store, and everywhere you went. In the months that followed, that rallying cry became a national symbol, a reaffirmation of American resolve, a reminder to love one another. Never forget, we're in this together. You saw it on lapel pins, on car bumpers, emblazoned in the sky over football games. But in the years that followed, that symbol became a bit of a talking point. Never forget. You still saw it every once in a while, but it was a little harder to grasp. Nonetheless, you heard it in speech after speech after speech. How many deployment ceremonies have involved mouthing, "Never forget"? How many 9/11 ceremonies have included the words, "Never forget"? How many times have we gone through the motions of demonstrating appreciation for one another, but uttering that catchphrase, "Never forget"? But if we reflect on the events of the nation in recent years, we may realize that we no longer know what never forget means. Maybe we forgot the very thing we were supposed to never forget. Maybe with all the never forgetting we were doing, we lost sight of what we knew all along. You see, an original truth behind 9/11 is that the dream of a civilization under democratic self-rule requires all of us. It requires we tolerate one another's truths, that we respect those to whom we share liberties. Our communal bond is the layer of armor keeping us from the monsters that lurk outside our borders. Never forget allows us to pay lip service to this foundational principle without thinking deeply about what it means to all of us today. So let's not vow to never forget. Let's instead commit to relearn what we realized that awful day. More importantly, let's learn new things about one another. Let's think about how we'll describe 9/11 to another generation of Americans 20 years from now. Let's ponder what we want them to understand that day. But first, let's make sure we really understand it ourselves. Let's never forget how we felt about one another on September 12th, 2001.